Mr. Woodworth, first of all, can you concisely tell us what you think we should pass to have the public understand their interactions with drones and different type of new flight vehicles?
I think sort of it comes back to the recommendations I put forth, and the first two are the sort of keys in that. So one, establish a target level of safety. So say sort of what the bar that we're building to is. And then two, establish a certification framework that's right-sized to that. So
do you think there'll be people that will complain about privacy issues with these vehicles flying over maybe their swimming pools?
So this is a question we often get, and I appreciate it. And I think that there is a path forward for the responsible integration of these systems into the national airspace, into everyone's daily lives. We take privacy very seriously in our operations. I know a lot of the other operators here have expressed similar thoughts. As you said, holding up the cell phone with any new technology, there's going to be questions about how it's used, how it develops, and I think that bringing it back to building a framework where the government has the ability and authority to both introduce and sort of regulate those consequences, I think would provide mitigations.
Thank you. Dr. Cahill, let me ask you a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned BEYOND in your testimony. Do you know if that's an acronym?
It was originally, excuse me, Mr. Cohen. Initially, it was not an acronym. They named the program BEYOND, and someone said, well, it's got to be an acronym, so they came up with one, and none of us can remember it.
That's appropriate. Did you recognize Mr. Young here?
I am delighted to see the painting of Congressman Young here. It reminds me of where I could be, which right now happens to be a lot colder and does not have cherry blossoms.
He was a beloved member of this committee and this Congress, and bipartisan, and just Mr. Young. And I love the fact he's got all forms of transportation in there except these new ones, the UA, the AMM, and the UA, whatever, but they were beyond him. Thank you. What do you see in Alaska? Alaska's got so many areas you can't get to except by airplane. How do you see drones and these other vehicles helping Alaska? And do you see them replacing helicopters, any of these vehicles that are manned, replacing helicopters as vehicles to take people up to see the glaciers?
Ranking Member Cohen, I do. I see them supplementing in certain cases and replacing in others. At the moment, we are flying our pipelines like the Trans-Alaska Pipeline using helicopters on a regular basis to look for encroachment, look for leaks, et cetera. That is a very hazardous mission. If I remember correctly, there have been no fatalities, but there have been injuries doing that mission. If we can do that routinely with a drone, with the right instrumentation, we can get excellent data and remove that hazard. In cases of doing passenger transport and cargo delivery to the communities, this is something where there is going to be a perpetual need to get cargo to those communities that right now are not served by road. 82% of our communities are only accessible year-round by air. So being able to bring in drones on a regular basis to supplement what is required to be maintained in terms of a balance between passenger and cargo aircraft through the Essential Air Service Program is going to be a case that the drones can supplement this, but we can't necessarily completely and totally replace it.
And how about with the visiting the glaciers, which is a nice thing to do? I had the opportunity to do it in a helicopter. Do you think these smaller vehicles will be able to do that, or are the winds too much of a risk?
I think in the distance, in the future, once we've proven the reliability of the autonomous systems or the remotely piloted systems, the urban air mobility concept, we would be able to use them for visiting glaciers. Of course, we need to be very, very careful about the conditions we're flying in.
Right.
You don't want to be flying in icing conditions. You need to be careful about, if you happen to be really cold on the glacier, there are strong winds, katabatic winds that come off the glacier. So there are a series of things that we would want to make sure that we had tested and evaluated first to ensure that aviation safety.
Thank you. Dr. Ginn and anybody in the panel that can offer me something. When we have these vehicles up there in the sky, that's going to be, could be an impediment to commercial and aviation that we have today. What safety procedures, regulations, laws do you think we need to pass to protect around airports? I know I've seen in Los Angeles, sometimes there's a drone flying around the airport and all of that. What do we need to do about that?
Well, thank you for the question, Congressman. I'll start by saying that I'm here in a capacity as a physician. I don't consider myself an aviation expert. However, I can say from experience, based on the operations that we conducted at my healthcare system, where we actually had to deconflict drones from EMS helicopters in real operating airspace on the ground at our healthcare system. We had to do that process manually, meaning there was not a platform for us to use. Air traffic control services were not available to us for or our operator, I should say, for the drone. So that process was carried out manually, phone calls. We called our operator had to call the helipad control to determine if there was a helicopter there or coming or going before we flew. I think in the future, there needs to be a framework that allows technology to take a role for things like unmanned traffic management systems, so that these systems that are operating closer to the ground and operate very differently than aircraft are visible or somehow integrated into that national airspace system in a way that creates, that sort of maintains a level of safety that exists in aviation now. I don't have the specific answer to how that will get done. I think we have to we have to let the operators operate first and then start working on integration.
Thank you, Doctor.